Hello everyone, in this video we are going to learn about the mechanism of inheritance in CSS. As we have already discussed that in some of the concepts, while we are giving some properties to our parent element, those properties will automatically applied for the child elements. In that case we have applied some beautiful mechanism, nothing but inheritance. Inheritance is nothing but the acquiring the properties of parent element within a child element. Let me proceed further into the topic. Generally, how the inheritance works in CSS? The mechanism of inheritance should apply to the every element in CSS because we need to acquire the properties from the parent element if there is no value for our child elements, right? That is the general concept of the inheritance. That means in CSS, the child element will naturally inherit properties from its parent element, and that mechanism of acquiring the properties from the parent element is nothing but an inheritance concept. Okay, let me take a simple example to give you a better understanding about the concept of inheritance. Okay, this is the general thing that we taken from the HTML file, and if you observe carefully, here we have body element. Okay, here we have body element and we have h1 header element and we have paragraph element, we have strong tag, and we have emphasized element. Okay, these are all the elements that we have included in this sample example. If you observe carefully, these two body elements are considered as the parent elements of this entire HTML file. Okay, for this entire element, these two body elements will be considered as the parent element, and for those parent elements we have child elements as h1p. Okay, this h1 header element and the p element will be considered as the child elements of this body parent element. Okay, within this body element we have included two elements like h1 and the p element. Okay, these two elements will be considered as the child elements of the body element. And we have strong element and the emphasized elements here. Those strong elements and the emphasized elements are considered as the child elements of the p parent element. The thing that you need to understand here is, if you observe carefully, within the opening and the closing tags of the body element, we have considered the h1 header element and the p element. Okay, these two will be considered as the child elements of this body parent element, right? And of course, this strong element and the emphasized elements will also be considered as the child elements of the body element, but those are considered as the grandchild elements because these are applied within the p tag. That means within the body element we have p tag, within the p tag we have the strong and the emphasized elements. That means the strong element and the emphasized elements are the child elements of the parent element of p tag, and this p element will be child element of this body tag. That means the strong element and the emphasized elements are the grandchilds of this body element. That means when you apply something to this body element, those all properties will be applied to both p tag elements and the strong elements also. That is the concept of inheritance, acquiring the properties of the parent element. That means this is the parent element. If you apply some changes over here, acquiring the properties of this parent element within a child element. For this body element, for example, this is the child element. Okay, when you apply some properties over this body element, it will be automatically applied to these child elements. Okay, because of the mechanism of inheritance. Okay, and if you observe carefully, this p element, if you modify some changes for this p element, those changes will be automatically applied to this strong element and the emphasized element because those are the child elements of this p parent element. Okay, this is the general mechanism of the inheritance. Okay, let me give you a quick understanding about it. If I consider some properties for the body element like this, I have included color red and font size 25 pixels and font family Calibri with border 15 pixels of size and with dotted border. I am considering the notation of the hexadecimal notation, which is a shorthand notation, and I am including the color of my border, dotted border, as black color. But if you observe carefully, when I take changes over these properties for the body element, it will be automatically applied to the all elements within the body elements. That means within this opening and the closing tag of the body element, those are all the child elements of this body parent element. Okay, that means when you apply changes or the properties for this body element, those are all will automatically apply to the every child element within the body element. That means until we have applied another modifications for the child elements, defaultly the body element properties will be applied to those child elements, until unless we have made changes over in the next lines of code for the child elements. Okay, this is the general thing of the mechanism of inheritance. For example, the output of this content, for example, when we are creating some body element, and for that body element I have included two child elements. For that child elements, I am not considering any properties for those particular child elements. I am just considering the code for the body element only. Okay, when I am considering the properties for the body element, those properties are applied for both the child elements. Okay, for all the child elements. That means here we are considering red with font size 25 pixels and with a font family of Calibri. Okay, those are all the properties will be applied to this body element. For example, if you consider this, these two are the, this is the h1 header which will be represented within the body element. Okay, that means it is the child element of the body parent element. So the properties that were applied to the body element will be applied directly to the both child elements. Okay, see here, even though the strong elements are within the P elements, those are indirectly have a grandchild relationship with the body element. The properties that I have applied to the body element will be applied to this, even though strong elements also, strong elements and the emphasized elements. When you created one element, between the opening and the closing tags of that element, whatever the elements will include in those tags, those are all will be considered as the child elements of that particular parent element. Okay, and if you can apply some properties over that parent element, those are all properties will acquire directly for those child elements also. Okay, like this. But if you observe carefully, the border property will not be applied over these child elements, because here we have to take a note that not all the properties get inherited within the child element, because we have some restrictions to avoid the inheritance mechanism. For example, this border property will not get inherited by this both child elements, because there is a case that not all the properties get inherited directly into the child element from the parent element. Keep a note on it. Okay, there are some cases which cannot be inherited directly. Okay, this border property will not get inherited to our child elements. And in addition to this body element, if I have overridden this h1 element, for example, if I am including h1 header, that means I am considering the element selector with h1. For the particular child element, I am considering some different properties like color green, font size 30 pixel and text transform uppercase. I am overriding the properties of the color and the font size within the separate child selector, right? Even though the body element have the child elements of the h1 and p, but if you consider a separate properties for that particular child elements, the first priority will go to that particular child element properties. That means we will consider these properties first. That means the output of this file will look like, if you consider these properties, that will be looks like this. That means the color of the green will apply to this particular h1, and the font size of the h1 will be increased to 30 pixels, and I am including one additional property within the h1 element selector like text transform to uppercase. That means the text will be transformed to uppercase. The changes of the h1 selector will not get affected by the body element, because we are considering some separate properties for the h1 element. Okay, even though it is a child element of the body element, the properties within the body element get overridden by the child element properties if there is any same properties occurs between the body and the h1 tag. That means here we have equal properties of color and font size, then it gives the priorities to the particular child element first. This is the general mechanism of the inheritance. To give you a better representation, I will take you to another extent of this inheritance concept. Let me consider one example like, see here, this is the general HTML file document. This is the body element. Within the body element we have article element. Within the article element we have header element. Within the header element we have h1 and the p elements. Okay, see here, this body element is opened here and the closing tag of the body element is here. Okay, within the body element we have article element. That means this article element is the child element of this body element, and we are opening the article element here and closing the article element here. Within the article element we have header element. That means header is the child element of the article element. Okay, header is the child element of the article element. Okay, and we have h1 and the p within the header elements, right? Within the opening and the closing tags of the header elements we have h1 and the p. That means these two h1 and the p are the child elements of the header element. That means if you give properties to the body element, it can acquired from the article, and if you give any other properties from the article element, it will acquired by the header. If you give any properties to the header, it will be automatically acquired by the h1 and the p. Here you have to note a point of something like these are all the child elements of this body element also, because within the body element if you apply something properties to this article, that means we are indirectly applying the every property of the body element to the header and the h1 and p elements also. That means if you apply some changes over the body tag, that means that body elements properties will be applied to the article tag. Those article properties will be applied to the header tag, and those header properties will apply to the h1 and the p. That means if you give any something properties to the body tag, those are all applied to the article, header, h1 and p. Okay, but if you are giving any properties to the article tag, it will be given to the header and the h1 and the p directly because of the mechanism of inheritance. But keep a note of it, if you change the properties of the article, it will not give the properties to the body tag, because body tag is the parent element. Okay, inheritance is the concept of acquiring the properties from the parent class, not from the child class. Okay, that means if you made changes over the properties of the article, it will be acquired to the only header and the h1 tags here, and if you give the properties to the header element, it will be gives the properties to the h1 and the p element. Okay, this is the general mechanism of inheritance. For example, I am taking one CSS file for my body element. Okay, I am considering my color as red, font size as 22 pixel, font family as Calibri, and font weight as bold. Okay, this is the properties that I have applied to my body element. If you see the output of this, then it will be applied to the h1 and the paragraph element, p element also, because of the indirect relationship with the h1 and the p element within the body element. That means these two elements are the child elements of this body element indirectly. That means body element properties will be applied to the article, and the article properties will be applied to the header, and the header properties will be applied to the h1 and the p. Next over this, if I am applying some properties to the article element like this, I am including the same property values to give you a difference between those. I am including the same color properties, like I am including color here as red, and now I am including my color as yellow. Here the property name is font size. Please make a correct on it. And if I have the output of this particular article element, and it will be looks like this. That means when you made changes for this article element with the same property name, color, the red color and the font size 22 pixel will be overridden by this article. We have applied these article properties to the header and the h1. That means we are giving the yellow color and the 25 pixel to this entire text, and we are transforming the text to uppercase. That means we have made the changes by using the article element here. And if I giving something properties to the header element, okay, those header element properties will give the first priority, because actual parent of this h1 and the p element are the header elements. Within the header elements we have h1 and the p elements. That means when you make changes for the header elements, those header elements properties will be given to the h1 and the p element. That means the output of this consideration will be looks like. That means we are overriding the color of yellow with white, and we are overriding the color of font size of 25 pixels with font size of 30 pixels, and we are overriding the text transform to uppercase from the uppercase to the lowercase. Okay, here there is some mistake, that the property name is font size, not font style. Sorry for that correction. And here we have to require font size. Okay, this is the general thing that we need to keep in mind for making the concept of inheritance. Okay, I think you are a bit clear about all the mechanism of the inheritance in the CSS file, and we will catch up in the next video. Thank you.